Chicago. When you hear that word, all kinds of things go through your mind. The Windy City, the Miracle Mile, the Union Stockyard, the Bulls, the Bears, the Blackhawks, the Cubs, the White Sox, some of the best deep dish pizza in the whole of America. Songs have been written, poems have been recited, all talking about a great city on Lake Michigan. Unfortunately, however, when you hear the word Chicago these days, there are other things that go through your mind, much more negative, much more depressing. Shootings, crime, death. Unfortunately, Chicago has been brought low by a lot of neglect and really bad policy put in by some really corrupt politicians. But all that may be about to change. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative. Step on up to my electronic front porch and let's talk. Now, I have to admit, I've been fairly itching to do a video about this mayor's race in Chicago, in part because I have a certain love and affinity for the state of Illinois. I didn't live in Chicago, but I did live for a number of years in Springfield, the state capital. I would visit Chicago on a fairly regular basis. And you have to keep in mind, to most Chicagoans, people in Springfield, or for that matter, anybody south of Interstate 80, are living in downstate. And just to give you an idea of how Chicagoans view their city with such pride, Interstate 80 happens to run right under the city of Chicago. So, frankly, about call it 85 to 90% of the entire state of Illinois is downstate to Chicagoans. But anyway, I digress. This mayor's race pits two Democrats against one another. Now, when you hear that, most people are going to say to themselves, well, what difference does it make? One Democrat's the same as the other. They're both going to do the same things. They're going to take the city down the toilet even faster. The only question is which one can do it at what speed. Normally, I would agree with you, but this race happens to pit a progressive Democrat against an old school moderate to conservative Democrat, something that's almost extinct in that party anymore. We're going to take a look at a real interesting article just to give you an idea of where the battle lines are drawn on this. As I start to pull this up, the author of the article is a young fellow named Jason Riley, which, if you're not familiar with his work, he works for the Wall Street Journal. Really good writer. Check out his stuff. He's got an article written today. Headline: Chicago may elect a sensible mayor. Tagline: Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson are Democrats, but that's where the similarity ends. So we get into this article. Democrat mayors have run Chicago exclusively since 1931. That streak will continue no matter who wins the runoff election on April the 4th, which is next Tuesday, by the way, because the candidates, Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson, are both Democrats. The good news for voters in the nation's third largest city is that they nevertheless have two clear choices on the ballot. Party affiliation is about the only thing the candidates have in common. Mr. Vallas is a white moderate backed by the police union. Mr. Johnson is a black progressive backed by the teachers union. Mr. Vallas has run hard on restoring public safety in a city that saw crime continue to rise in 2022 and that has long been the poster child for big city mayhem. He wants to expand school choice for low-income families. Remember that sentence. Mr. Johnson opposes the creation of additional charter schools and has called for cutting the police budget. Now, I said a moment ago, these are two different Democrats. And as you can see from Jason Riley's article, boy, ain't that the truth. These guys are most certainly not from the same ideological stripe. We're going to take a look at both of them here in just a minute, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on what I think this election is going to mean for not only the city of Chicago, but for big city politics around the country, and maybe more importantly, the question of whether or not we can restore our metropolises to being safe and sane places that people can not only live, but they can also visit. We'll get into that in just a minute. As I said a moment ago, these two men could not be more different and more ideologically apart. We're going to take a look first at Paul Vallas. I'm going to pull up his website. I won't go through everything on it because if I did, we'd be here all night And this video would go on forever and a blue day, which most people think, good God, your videos already go on forever and a blue day. But all right, your snide, snarky peanut gallery remarks aside, let's look at Vallis for a second. By way of a little bit of background on this fella, this guy's been around for a long time. And I mean a long time. He's a former state legislator. He's worked in the Chicago school system as the CEO. He's also worked in cities like Philadelphia and New Orleans, turning their educational systems around. He used to work for Mayor Daley the Younger, about probably, call it 30, 35 years ago. This man's been around the block for a while. Now, what makes him different than most other Democrats? Anywhere else in the country right now, in a major metropolitan area, you're seeing progressive, ideological, woke policies and agendas being moved forward in the administration of government. Now, there was a time where if you were a Democrat mayor in a big city, your main responsibilities and the things you were judged by were things like, is the city clean? Are the streets paved? Is the garbage being picked up? Are we safe from crime? And in creating those conditions, is this the sort of place that people want to visit? Not so much anymore. These days, the question is, can you move ideological wokeism, SJWism, I'd argue Marxism, forward by implementing it in how you run a city government? Vallis is not of that tradition. Vallis is what I would argue is more of an old Daley Democrat. Okay, they might be a lefty on some issues, but when it comes to running the city, let's make sure we take care of the basics. Now, Vallis's positions are very simple. It's mentioned in Riley's article, he's backed by the police union. He wants to hire not only 600 additional officers, he wants to replace the current 1,700 vacancies, a grand total of 2,300 new police officers on the Chicago police force. Now, in a city where you've got a lot of problems, having that much manpower on the streets has got to help. If nothing else, it'll give the citizens and business owners a sense of safety that they know the police will be there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still issues to be worked out, mostly having to do with the enforcement of law after the police make an apprehension and the prosecution thereof, which could or could not be influenced by your prosecuting attorney or by other Cook County officials. They love to meddle in these things. But that's where Vallis is going. He wants to create the kind of environment where the city is safe, and if that means hiring more police officers, so be it. The fact that he got their police union's endorsement is huge. Normally, that would go to almost anybody else other than somebody like Vallis. But the fact that the police union is willing to come out and take a stand for this guy is pretty significant. Now, the real kicker in the city of Chicago is education. Crime is ranked as the number one issue by polling, depending on who's doing it out there. But the other issue is education. The schools in Chicago are absolutely atrocious. One of the things that Vallis wants to do is bring in what I would call a modified form of school choice. Now, his positions are pretty well laid out. I'll leave the website in the description on the video so you can take a look at it for yourself. But this guy is most certainly not your typical big city Democrat. Now, his opponent, on the other hand, Brandon Johnson, is most certainly a current example of what it's like to have a progressive Democrat running government. So we have two Democrats running for mayor in Chicago. One of them is white. He's moderate. He wants to hire more police officers, and he wants to give people some form of school choice to let their children go to different schools. The other Democrat is anything but that. Let's take a look at Mr. Brandon Johnson. Now, before we do, I want to go back to that article from Jason Riley and read you a paragraph that I think is very telling before we get over to Brandon Johnson's website that he's got up as he's running for mayor. There's a paragraph toward the end of Jason Riley's article. Mr. Johnson, meanwhile, has given second city residents little reason to believe that his priorities would differ much from those of the progressive incumbent mayor, Lori Lightfoot, whose re-election bid ended when she failed to finish in the top two slots in the first round of voting. In a 2020 radio interview, Mr. Johnson approvingly said that defunding the police is, quote, an actual, real political goal, end of quote. He's since distanced himself from that language. I don't know about distance. He might have backed off, but I don't think he backed up. Anyway, I digress. But as commissioner for Cook County, which includes Chicago, he sponsored a resolution to reduce resources. On the campaign trail, he has said that he would cut the police budget by at least $150 million. Ay, ay, ay. At a time when you've got shootings every weekend on the south side of Chicago, I don't know that they need to have their police budget cut anymore, but that's for the citizens of the city of Chicago to decide. Now, let's take a look at his website. Give me 1 second, and we will pull that up. Here we go. On the issues, as a public school teacher, organizer, and Cook County Commissioner, Brandon is the only candidate who's been a leader in our communities in the fights for fully funded public schools, affordable housing, green jobs, and access to mental health care. As mayor, he will provide leadership to put Chicago on the right track. Brandon stands for the people, not entrenched special interest and political insiders. My God, he sounds like an AOC clone. I'm sorry. He will advance smart, innovative solutions that address the root causes of violence and poverty. Now, that is from his issues page. And if you go down the page, you can see things like affordable housing, arts and culture, city budget and revenue, disability justice, education, which we'll come back to that one in a minute, environmental justice, gender equity, human and health services, immigration, LGBTQ rights, public safety and police reform, reproductive rights, transportation. Let's take a look at education first for just a second. I want to reference probably the last paragraph is the most telling. If our city is going to compete successfully in the 21st century, we need to ensure that our children from every community possess 21st century skills. We need to tie workforce development efforts into our schools, starting in the earliest grades, and help CPS, Child Protective Services, to do its job providing needed support around school safety, helping students traumatized by violence, expanding school-based health centers, and improving access to technology. What we cannot do is cut city aid to schools as the current mayor is doing. Oh, yeah, kick a girl in the butt when she's going out the door, why don't you? And plans to do as we implement an elected school board. Then we need to work together to increase school funding, institute a fair school funding formula. I got one comment about that whole school funding formula thing. City of Chicago, according to Jason Riley's article, spends about $30,000 per student per year in Chicago, which is $10,000 more than anywhere else in the state of Illinois. Is funding of schools really the issue, or could it be how we use the money? But again, for the people of Chicago to decide. Now, one last thing to take a look at: public safety and police reform. We'll read the second paragraph. The Chicago Police Department must comply with the federal consent decree and increase its homicide clearance rate. I will work closely with Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability to hold police accountable and evaluate the goals and performance of the CPD, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, and the Police Board. I will remove the flawed gang database and support treatment, not trauma, reduce inefficiencies in public safety spending, and direct more funds to violence prevention and community safety programming that address the root causes of community violence. And my administration will attack these root causes of crime and poverty by investing in the basics: good schools, good jobs, housing, and mental health. I don't know about you, but when it comes to these two guys, I don't know that I can remember a contrast so stark. And the ironic thing about this isn't a contrast between a Democrat and a Republican, a conservative Republican and a liberal Democrat. These are two Democrats. I haven't seen something like this inside the Democratic Party in years. I tell you what, I don't know how this election is going to turn out next Tuesday night, but this is going to be amazing to watch go down. And depending upon who gets elected, the ramifications could be felt in Chicago for years to come. So what's going to happen next Tuesday night? I have no idea. What should happen next Tuesday night? I'll tell you. For the safety of the citizens of the city of Chicago that are still left living inside that municipal boundary, for business owners, for kids, for everybody, Paul Vallis needs to be elected mayor of Chicago. Now, you might have suspected by the way I was talking about this, that's where I was going. And yeah, you'd be right. Because I'm sorry, we've seen what woke SJW progressive ideology, when implemented in city government, does to a major municipality like Chicago or New York City or Baltimore or Philadelphia or LA. Name the city around the country where this kind of stuff is manifesting itself. These cities are being slowly destroyed from the inside by politicians who are more interested in making sure that they can move a woke agenda, a SJW agenda, a Marxist agenda forward than they are making sure that their citizens are safe, that services are provided in an efficient, cost effective manner, and that people actually want to live and come to that city. That is where we are right now. Now, in the end, this is up to the citizens of the city of Chicago. It's up to the voters. I know this. The police union backs Vallis. The teachers union backs Johnson. And right now, the teachers unions are pouring big time money into Johnson's campaign against Vallis. They don't want Vallis in office because they know if he gets a chance to implement a more open form of school choice for the parents of Chicago, their days are numbered and they got problems almost immediately. I don't know all the solutions that ought to happen for Chicago or any other major city. I do know what history and time have taught us, that when we take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves. When we're more interested in making sure that our fellow man is taken care of, that our government is run efficiently, and that we're doing the things that municipal governments ought to do, cities tend to run a whole lot better. It's my hope for the citizens of Chicago that they elect a mayor who will turn it around, because 4 years of Lori Lightfoot has been an absolute unmitigated disaster. Maybe Chicago's the beginning. Maybe this is the place where citizens in these cities start to break free from the ideological chains that they've been put under by these people. Maybe not, but we're going to find out come Tuesday night. That's what I think about it. What do you think? As we wrap this up, please do the following as always. If you're not a subscriber to this channel, please do so. Hit the thumbs up. I could use all the help I could get. I'd really appreciate it because it would help with the algorithm. If you have friends of yours that you think would enjoy this kind of content, please share the video around and hit the bell for notifications. I want to make sure you're aware anytime a new video goes up. My name is Brian Trippett. I am your front porch conservative, and I'll see you next time.